We're back to Neil Haley show, and my guest today is the one that's made it all happen. We've had such amazing guests, and Syosset, New York, the big event, and I'll talk about it in a bit. I found out how to finally pronounce it based on my good friend Neil Smith of NHL Wraparound, former general manager of the New York Rangers. So FYI, that whole connection. And Neil and I will be connecting when I go out to New York as well. And my guest today is Daniel Fazzina, and Daniel is the author of a new audiobook, Divine Intervention, which he released years ago, and we'll talk more about that. 50 true stories of God's miracles today. The launch party, we're going to talk about the event in Syosset, New York, and that again will be the Power of Testimony event at Shelter Rock Church in Syosset, New York. Daniel, thanks for stopping by. How are you?
Neil Haley, the media giant. I'm so excited to be with you. It's been a long time. We've been friends and colleagues for many, many years, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you on your show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me about your background growing up. Were you raised in a Christian home?
Yes, I was. I was raised on Long Island, New York, going to Lutheran church, and it was kind of a formulaic religious kind of environment that I grew up in. But when I was a teenager, a young teenager, probably 14 years old, is when I really kind of understood the gospel and that Jesus came and died for my sins. And he promises that if we have faith in him and we believe that he died for us and that he was raised from the dead, we'll have eternal life. So I made my own decision to follow Jesus at 14. And from then, I started living with a sense of his calling and purpose and started experiencing answered prayers. And the fear of death left me at that point because I had had struggles with that. Someone had asked me, well, if you died tonight, are you sure you'd go to heaven? And at that point, I really wasn't. I wasn't sure if I would go to heaven or hell. And I was just, kind of confused on that. But when I finally was explained the gospel and what God requires of us and what he wants, and just to have simple faith that Jesus paid it all on the cross. He died for our sins, past, present, and future, and we can look to him and put our hope in that, and we get eternal life through Jesus Christ. So that's kind of how I was raised and how I became a believer in Jesus.
So you already had that background. So when and how did you become a follower of Jesus? You talked a little bit about that whole process. So have you experienced you've experienced two major miracles that you have to do with healing in your life. Tell me about those.
Yes. So when I was a teenager, I started developing back pain. Excuse me. And it was stemming from a birth defect and a torn cartilage ring. So I had a disc that was bulging out, pressing against a nerve. And I had pain whether I sat or stood for any length of time. And, I remember having to sit out in 12th grade gym class because I couldn't wrestle with the other guys. And I know you might appreciate that. And I know you're a
Yeah,
wrestler.
the professional wrestler. Yes, I appreciate
So,
that.
but for me, it wasn't my shtick. I didn't particularly care for rolling around with other men in tights. So I was okay with sitting out. But anyway, I went through physical therapy and chiropractic for a number of years and nothing was really working. So I stopped all therapy when I was in college. I just figured I'd have to live with the pain the rest of my life. And fast forward to 2001, I went on a men's retreat with some guys from my church. We were out in Eastern Long Island, Montauk Point, Montauk Manor, and there was about 40 guys in this hotel meeting room. And they said, we're going to dedicate this afternoon to prayer to Jesus for physical healing. So if you have any issues, come to the front of the room. We'll pray for you. So there's all these guys at the front of the room praying for each other, laying hands on each other and stuff. And I was online to go to the front. And my friend Dave was online next to me and he says, Daniel, what are you going to ask for prayer for? And I said, well, my back, because I've had this problem all these years. And right then, Neil, the pain disappeared. I was bending and twisting, and I just didn't feel it
Wow.
anymore. And at that point, no one had even touched me, no one had prayed for me. It was an atmosphere of healing, and I believe God chose that moment to take the pain away so I would know it was him and not doctors or therapy or anything like that, which I'm not against, but God can use doctors, he can use therapy, and sometimes he can do things miraculously and touch us directly. And that's what happened. So that kind of took my faith ahead. And then the following year, 2002, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a massive tumor the size of my heart inside my chest, right above my heart. It was so large, it was grapefruit sized, and it was crushing my pulmonary artery. So I wasn't
Oh,
getting
wow.
oxygen.
Mhm.
Doctor said, well, it's B cell lymphoma. We can't operate because if we do, it'll just spread. We'll try to treat it with medication, but we're not sure if it's going to respond. And if it doesn't, you'll be dead within 3 weeks to 3 months. And getting that diagnosis at 27 years old after having never been seriously ill before, it was shocking. It was surreal. I hit it with everything I knew how to, a lot of different types of treatments and therapies, a lot of people praying for me, anointing me with oil, telling me, prophesying to me, saying, Daniel, this thing was born to die. It's going to be a testimony to the Lord.
Right.
And I believe that. And it's a long story, but they were going to give me 6 rounds of chemo once a month for 6 months.
Okay.
And halfway through, they were going to take a halfway point scan to gauge the progress of, they were hoping the tumor would be smaller. And Neil, when I got that scan, the halfway point scan, not only was the tumor smaller, it was completely gone. Came back completely negative.
Wow.
No more cancer in my body, no more tumor, nothing, not even any scar tissue. My cardiologist said not only is it amazing that the tumor disappeared, but normally when tumors retract, they leave scar tissue behind. Mine was
Right.
completely clean, as if it was never there. So God really did an amazing work and a miracle, and I'm so grateful. He kept me around because I guess he had more work for me to do, and that's kind of what led to the Divine Intervention book series and radio show.
So interesting. So you go in, then you do this. What made you decide about this book? You had these miracles in your life. What made you decide to write the book?
Yeah, so when I went back to work at the TV station I was at the time, I had been out of work for probably 7 or 8 months recovering from cancer. And when I went back, I started sharing the story of what I went through with my coworkers. Now, don't forget, Long Island, New York is not the Bible Belt. There's a lot of skepticism and unbelief. And, when I grew up, a lot of my friends were atheists and agnostic and Wiccan and pagan. And so you have the whole gamut there. And so I would share my story of what the miracles that happened. And there's so much more to the story, but I would share that with my coworkers, and they were just incredulous about what I went through and how I survived. And so I said, well, if you think what I went through is amazing, you should hear about my friends' stories. Because as a follower of Jesus since I'm very young, I've known a lot of people who've had amazing miracles. So I started sharing those stories, like my friend Charlie Pitts, who was a recon guy in Vietnam. He was a Marine. And when he was in the Marines, he was leading an expedition behind enemy lines. His 5 guys jumped out ahead of him, and he jumped out of a C-130, pulled the ripcord, and the chute didn't open. He pulled the secondary one. That one didn't open. So he's free falling with 2 ripcords in his hands. And what happened was he actually landed on top of the open parachute of the guy below him, bounced off that one, hit the next one, hit all 5 in sequence, landed in the top of a tree, and the branches broke his fall. He slid down to the base of the tree and walked away unharmed. And he knew that was God's stairway for him. And he's now a full-time pastor in Long Island. Another one of the guys who visited me in the hospital when I was, had cancer, he shared with me how he had been wasting away and dying from AIDS, losing weight. And he had like
Wow.
6 or 7 HIV tests, all came back positive. And he's just like, he finally just gave, he just said, whatever life I have left, Lord, I'm going to serve you with it. And he started mentoring
Right.
kids and working in the church. And after about a year or so, he realized he hadn't had a sniffle in a year. He was gaining weight. He's like, what's going on? He goes in for another HIV test. I think it was his seventh or eighth, came back negative. God totally healed him and restored him, and he's perfectly fine, happy and healthy, married today. And this was, over 20 years ago. So I started sharing those stories, and they're like, "Man, you should collect these and put them into a documentary film or a book
Right.
or something." So that's what I started doing, tracking down all these people and interviewing them and putting them together in Divine Intervention. This is the latest in the edition, in the series, Divine Intervention: 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today.
And what's interesting, Daniel, is I'll go my backstory with you, and is that I met you first of all from special guests. Then you ended up showing up at the National Publicity Summit when I had my first media opportunity there.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like we knew each other from email. Then we met each other at the National Publicity Summit, and
right,
so it was a weird situation. We both were on-air talent. We both had things to promote, and we had our own shows.
right,
That
right.
was and we worked for special guests. So we had so many
A lot in
different things,
common.
a lot of things in common. And then lo and behold, and this is what teaches you guys to build relationships. This is probably 12 years ago the last time. Daniel and I even checked the text message. It was like 2014 or something. And literally, I get a phone call from him and he tells me about this. And I'm like, I'm in. I'm
I,
going out to New York. And I'm like, I'm
I
in.
still
This is
appreciate your
exciting.
enthusiasm and
Yeah,
support. I really
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, let's do this. And I've been interviewing the different people, but that's what Daniel does. And that's where he understands the old PR motto. Once you start promoting, you promote all the way through. And that's it. So the Divine Intervention series book, what made the podcast? Because, or really radio show, because you and I are still the radio guys that can't use the word podcast even now, even though I do more. I still think radio show brings more credibility, but that those days are in. That shows our age.
yeah.
But tell me about the radio show, how that happened.
Yeah, so I was working at a television station in New York after I was healed of cancer, and one of the guys who was like an assistant vice president at my company, he was a partner at a radio station in Long Island. I think it was like a classic rock station or alternative station, something like that. And I was talking to one of my coworkers who had a radio show on that network, and
Right.
it was called Hair Hut. It was a classic rock show. And I somehow we got to talking, and I had this idea to do a radio show based on the divine intervention uh, stories that I was collecting in my first book. And he said, "Why don't you give this guy a call, and maybe you could do a show on like Sunday mornings or something, and have it, Christian based or whatever." And I was like, "Okay." So I reached out to the guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm interested, but hold your hold that thought for a little while, and get back to me because there's things happening." And so I had to wait. I don't know, a few weeks or a few months. I can't remember. But in the meanwhile, what happened was that whole station, this guy Dennis, who worked at the TV
Right.
station, he partnered with a local pastor, and the whole station changed format to Christian from like classic rock. And so when that happened, he's like, now, we want to get your show on the air. So I met with the pastor who was running it, and he loved the concept, talk show based on miracles. And so he gave me a shot. He said, all right, I'll give you a 13-week contract. I had to buy airtime, which was very expensive. I didn't really have the money, but it was a step of faith. And I said, okay, Lord, you're going to have to provide because I can't really afford this. And so I did that. And, it was amazing. I didn't want to get on the air and beg for money. It just wasn't
Right.
my style. So I said, Lord, if you're going to have to provide, otherwise, if you don't, I'm just going to have to quit. And so that's what happened. I started doing the interviews. And after about 4 or 5 episodes, the pastor came to me, the guy who ran the radio station, Rich Anderson. He said, look, I love what you're doing. You don't have to pay me anymore. Just keep doing it. And that was the start on WLIX in New York. And then it got picked up on other stations and got syndicated. And I think at its height, it was on about 20 different stations in about a dozen states. And we just love talking about Jesus and hearing miracles about how God works in people's lives.
And so that's where the story goes that you got syndicated, nationally syndicated radio show, just like me, still, who's a nationally syndicated radio show, even though radio's dead and I don't know what I'm still doing on it.
Bringing life
So
back.
so I like syndication,
Yep.
and I want to be on as many platforms and different places as possible. Um, Tell us about a few of your favorite miracle stories from your book. These are ones that I remember because we have been interviewing all the people that are going to be speaking in Syosset, New York. I want you to go ahead and give me some of the stories that are in the book that are not going to be people speaking. Can you hit one of those for me? Or am I throwing you off the loop on that?
No. There's 50 different ones to choose
Yeah.
from in this book. And so one of my favorites is that of Fred Clem, who is also a native Long Islander. I met Fred in 2000 at a Bible study at a friend's house, and I noticed he had a slight speech impediment, and he had this massive scar, like right on his like his throat. And I was like, wow, when I see a scar like that, I know there's a story behind it. And being inquisitive, as a journalist by nature, I had to ask him, like, okay, what happened here? So he proceeded to tell me his testimony. And what happened, Neil, was, he was riding a jet ski uh, at Smith Point Beach in Shirley, New York in 1996. He was like 23 years old, roughly. and he was going really, really fast. He was jumping wakes from passing fishing boats, and he hit a sandbar going at like 45 miles an hour. He had massive head trauma, knocked unconscious, floating in the water for like 17 minutes until someone pulled him out. They helicoptered him to the hospital. They put him on life support. The doctors are telling his family he's not going to make it through the night, get his affairs in order. So surprisingly, he does make it through the night. And they're like, well, he's not going to survive the week. And he survives the week. And he persists in the state week after week, month after month. And all the while, the doctors are telling his family he's never going to wake up. And he's probably, if he does, in the remote chance that he does wake up, he will be a vegetable or brain damage or something like that. So he's telling me the story that when he was in the coma, he thought he was asleep in his house and that his kids were in the next room and everything was fine.
Right.
And he said he had what he thought it was a dream, but then he was like, no, it wasn't a dream. It was a vision. He saw Jesus Christ at the Last Supper with his apostles. And he said Jesus got up, walked over to him, didn't say anything to him, but reached out with his hand. And Fred put his hand up. And when Jesus touched his hand, he instantly woke up from this coma. He had been in the coma for nearly 6 months. And when Jesus touched his hand, he awakened and he was so confused. He didn't know where he was. He's in the hospital. He sees all these tubes all over his body. He gets really confused,
Right.
starts ripping them out, and tries to walk, but he can't because his muscles had atrophied so much for not moving for 6 months. The nurses come running in. Everyone is shocked to see him awake, and they stabilize him. And eventually, he spent like almost a full year in the hospital, and then he had to go to physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy to learn how to walk again and to speak again, all this. And eventually, he started telling people about how the Lord touched him. Now, this is the thing, Neil. This guy was an agnostic. He didn't even believe in God.
Right.
He knew who Jesus was from going to Catholic church as a kid, but he didn't really give God a second thought. I mean, when he was young, he said he was a nasty, rugged, mean guy. He liked fights. He instigated them both physically and verbally. Bad news. But God intervened and touched his life, and he since gave his life to the Lord, became a born again Christian, and he's alive and well to this day, and he's sharing his testimony. And his story is called Jesus and the Jet Ski, and it's in Divine Intervention: 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today.
Wonderful. And what you're learning in this telling the story is how much has this changed people's lives, your book and your radio show?
I do get occasional emails from people who've heard the radio show or who've read the book, and they say they're very encouraged, and that's really my goal. I want to inspire people and give them hope. We live in a fallen and broken world, and people are desperately in need of hope. They need to know that God is real, that He loves them. And I feature the miracle testimonies not so much for the miracles themselves, but to point people to the God of miracles, and so they can know that, yeah, the things that you read about in the Bible, it's full of the supernatural and it's full of miracles, but are those things real? Are they still happening today? And they are. Um, One of my non-believing coworkers actually at the TV station, when I went back to work, he said, well, Daniel, I don't believe in miracles. If the miracles that are written in the Bible are true, I'd still be happening today. How come I'd still be seeing them today? How come I've never seen one? And that was a great question. I was like, wow, you know what? Maybe you're just not traveling in the right circles, or because I've known a lot of people who've had miracles. So he really encouraged me to put these stories together to show evidence that, hey, God is still working despite the chaos and the craziness and the sin and the brokenness. God is still intervening and He's changing lives one heart at a time.
All right. Describe the miraculous circumstances surrounding your meeting and working with Fox News host Lauren Green.
Oh, that was an incredible story. So this is a divine appointment. Um, that I just cannot doubt. So I heard Lauren share her story on I guess it was an early podcast. It was called the Distinguished Visitor Series at the King's College. So they would bring in people who are distinguished in the media and stuff, and they would share their stories, Christian people mostly. So I heard Lauren sharing her story, and I was so encouraged by her. She's such an amazing woman, very talented, very open, very dedicated in her faith, and she's a prominent media figure on Fox News. Matter of fact, she was the first journalist hired at Fox News in 1996. She's been there since the inception. So I was like, I really want to encourage her and just help her just encourage her to keep doing what she's doing. So I had a friend who worked at Fox News, and I said, hey, can you get me in for a tour? I want to meet Lauren Green. And he's like, yeah, sure, come on down. So he gets me in. I have a copy of my first book in my hands, and I signed it for her, and he took me up to her office, and I poked my head in. She was on the phone, so he took me around, met some other people, came back 20 minutes later. She's still on the phone. Go around again, come back another half an hour. She finally is off the phone. I poke my head in, and she's like, "Oh yeah, come on in." So I introduced myself and I'm like, hey, I'm Daniel Fazzina. I heard you on this podcast and I just want to encourage you and I just keep up what you're doing. And I want to give you a copy of this book that I wrote. It's called Divine Intervention and it's about miracles. So, she takes the book and she's like looking at it and she looks up at me and she looks down at the book and she's got this strange look on her face. I'm like, is everything all right? She's like, I can't believe you just came into my office today with this book. I just so happened to be working on a story about miracles today, and you show up in my office unannounced with this
Oh,
book.
wow.
And I was like, wow, that was totally God. And long story short, before I even got out of the building, her producer called me and invited me to be a guest on her show. So a couple weeks later or a month later, whatever, I go back and I'm a guest on her show. And this is totally God too, Neil, because so I was supposed to be one of two guests. They were trying to get an atheist to come on and debate me about the existence of God, right? So I go in and the producer comes into the green room and he's like, "Man, it's really strange. We tried to get an atheist to come in and debate you and none of them could make it in today. We called like over 5 or 7 different people and one was on vacation, one had car trouble, one was sick, and like they couldn't find one atheist in New York City to debate me." So, so he's like, it's just you and your book today. I was like, okay, that's fine. So they bring me out. It's supposed to be for one segment. I go out with Lauren. We have a great time talking about miracles and everything. And during the break, she says, don't leave yet. Just hang out in the green room. I want to talk to you more after the show. I said, okay. So I go out to the green room and I'm watching her. She's interviewing Dr. Chauncey Crandall via satellite. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Dr. Crandall is the one who prayed over Jeff Markin, who had died of a heart attack. He's the one who prayed. He's a
Yeah.
cardiologist. So he prayed over Jeff when Jeff came back to life. This is the guy.
Right.
So I'm watching Lauren interview him, and all of a sudden they lose the satellite feed. The producer comes running into the green room. He's like, "We lost the feed. You're on for another segment." And he brings me back out to the set. And so I had another like 15-minute segment with Lauren.
Wow. On Fox. That's crazy because no one has that. They get a 3 minute
Oh,
segment.
it was amazing. I had 2 segments. So after the show, Lauren turns to me and she's like, in all the years I've been here at Fox News, that has never happened before, where they lost the feed. So it was totally God setting that whole thing up. He wanted these stories to get out there and he opened
100%.
the door for me. It was crazy, but amazing.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about the event really quickly. Talk about it.
Yes. So September 12th, 2026 at Shelter Rock Church in Syosset, New York on Long Island. We're going to be doing the official launch for the Divine Intervention audiobook, and the event is called Power of Testimony. Lauren Green, who we just mentioned, is going to be the MC, and we have a keynote speaker, Kamal Salim, who is a former PLO terrorist. He was on fire for jihad and Allah and bringing down America in the West, and God totally changed him. He had like a Damascus Road type of conversion experience, like the Apostle Paul or Saul, who became Paul on the road to Damascus
Right.
from the Bible. But so he's going to be the keynote speaker. We've got 5 other people who are featured in the Divine Intervention book also going to be speaking. We're sharing testimonies, live worship music, a panel discussion with Lauren Green, Q&A, and it's just going to be a really powerful day of exhibiting the work that God has done in people's lives.
And you're seeing there's gonna be all different walks of life at this event, right? You said
Absolutely.
that are coming, that are coming.
Jews and Muslims and agnostics. And yeah, this is Long Island. So yeah.
And you invited media people too. That's how I'm coming because of media. How many media people are coming?
I don't know yet, but we're expecting 350 people because that's the
Wow.
hold. So
And you're going to easily hit that because there's a few more weeks away and you're getting the right word out. And it's amazing what you're doing, Daniel. And
I'm
are you bringing back the show?
yes, actually, Divine Intervention Radio is coming back. I had to put it on hiatus for a few years, but I have a network that's going to distribute it too. So I'll be resuming Divine Intervention Radio as well. I'm very excited about it. And
Really wonderful. So
yeah,
where are you going to, so you'll be producing it and getting it out there and then looking for guests, right? So people that have these miracles, you're looking for guests right now, aren't you?
Absolutely, yes. I had done about 350 interviews before I had to stop. And, the great thing about it is that God is always doing things. There's no shortage of miracle testimonies out there.
Right.
I'm just trying to help get the word out and let the world know that, hey, God is still working, He's still moving, He's still changing lives.
Awesome. I'm excited. And so you'll keep us abreast of what's happening with divine intervention, but you're gonna have more events too. This is just the first, right? You're gonna get more in other play. You're not near New York. You're gonna be looking to go to other areas, right?
Yes, you can go to events.artofheaven.com to get tickets and to see the schedule. Artofheaven.com. So the one in New York is going to be the first of many. I've got San Diego, Ohio, and Pittsburgh lining up already.
Wow.
And I've had offers or requests from other pastors and other churches and other states that say, hey, we want this event in our church, in our state, in our city. So God is opening the doors and we're just trying to get those miracle testimonies out there.
All right. Sounds good, Daniel. We really appreciate it. Website again for people for tickets.
Artofheaven.com, or you can also go to divineinterventionradio.com. There's a link there as well.
All right. You're listening and watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just